My name is Annalise, though most people call me Annie. I'm 38 years old, and I live in a city that wears its rain like a comfortable gray coat, Portland, Oregon. From the window of my second-story apartment in the Alphabet District, I can see the damp, glistening leaves of the maple trees and watch the world move at a gentle, thoughtful pace. It's a pace that has always suited me. I run my own small cybersecurity consultancy, Aegis Solutions, from a home office filled with the quiet hum of servers and the earthy scent of my countless potted ferns. My work is my sanctuary, a world of logic, patterns, and elegant solutions. For a long time, it was the only part of my life that made perfect sense. For the last 9 years, I shared this life with my husband, Julian. When we first met, he was like a burst of unexpected sunshine in my calm, orderly world. He was a curator of ideas, an architect of experiences, or so he called himself. He spoke of art, music, and travel with a breathless passion that made my structured life feel, for the first time, a little bit beige. He had a way of looking at you, a focused intensity in his dark eyes, that made you feel like you were the only person in a crowded room. He saw potential everywhere, in dilapidated buildings, in forgotten melodies, and, most of all, in me. He said I was his anchor, the bedrock upon which he could build his magnificent dreams. For years, I believed him. I wanted to be that anchor. I loved his soaring ambition, even when it never quite touched the ground. While I built my business, methodically and quietly, he floated from one grand vision to the next. There was the boutique travel agency that would offer soul-altering journeys, the pop-up art gallery that fizzled out after one show, and the artisanal gin distillery that never produced a single drop of gin. Each venture was fueled by my income and ended with his eloquent, almost poetic, explanations for its failure. It wasn't a lack of talent, he'd insist, but a world not yet ready for his vision. I propped him up, financially and emotionally. I told myself this is what partnership was: one person provides the stability, the other provides the dreams. I ignored the subtle warning signs that flickered like failing lights. The way my savings account would dip unexpectedly, explained away by a can't-miss investment opportunity. The credit card statements I stopped asking to see. The way he'd subtly frame my practicality as a lack of faith in him. "Don't worry your beautiful, logical head about it, Annie," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "Leave the messy, brilliant stuff to me." And so I did. I retreated further into the clean, predictable world of my work, where every problem had a solution and every action had a clear and traceable consequence. The irony is that my entire career is built on identifying deception. I design and implement security systems for companies, protecting them from fraud, phishing, and digital intrusion. One of my proudest creations is a proprietary system I call the Labyrinth. It's a sophisticated sandbox environment, a digital honeypot designed to lure and trap potential threats. It looks and feels like a legitimate network, complete with active accounts, including a high-limit credit card. But every single transaction, every keystroke, is monitored, logged, and analyzed in real time. It's a beautiful, intricate trap, designed to teach my clients how to spot fraud by studying it in a controlled environment. I never, in my wildest imaginings, thought I would deploy it in my own home. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday, a day so ordinary it was almost insulting. Julian had been quieter than usual for a week, a brooding, restless energy coiling in the spaces between us. He spoke vaguely of needing a change of scenery to break through a creative block. I nodded, offering to book a weekend trip to the coast. He just smiled a sad, distant smile and said, "Something bigger, Annie. I need to feel the sun." That night, I fell asleep to the familiar sound of rain tapping against the windowpane. I don't know what time it was, but it must have been deep in the night when he slipped out of bed. I was a heavy sleeper, a fact he had always found endearing. He must have counted on it as he crept downstairs to my office. He knew I sometimes left my work laptop open, a bad habit I couldn't seem to break. He also knew where I kept my wallet. What he found inside was my personal card and another one, a sleek, black card with no name, only the Aegis Solutions logo. It was the master key to the labyrinth. He was careful. He didn't take the card itself. He just used his phone to photograph the front and back, capturing the number, expiration date, and security code. Then, he slipped back into bed, his breathing even and slow, a perfect imitation of sleep. I woke up the next morning feeling a strange emptiness in the room. He was already gone. A note was propped against the French press on the kitchen counter. His handwriting, a dramatic, looping script, was instantly recognizable. My dearest Annie, I've gone to find the sun. Needed to reset my soul. Don't worry. I'll be back transformed. All my love, Jay. My first feeling was a familiar pang of weary resignation. Another impulsive trip, another bill I would inevitably have to cover. I made my coffee and sat down at my desk, ready to start my day. That's when I saw the first email notification. It was from the labyrinth. The subject line was stark, fraud alert, unusual activity detected. My breath caught in my throat. I opened the email. The system had flagged a charge for $12,500. It was for a one-way, first-class ticket from Seattle to Naples, Italy, on Alitalia. My heart began to beat a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I pulled up the labyrinth's dashboard. The system was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Another charge appeared, a booking for a week at a 5-star hotel in Positano, one of the most expensive on the Amalfi Coast. Then another, a wire transfer to a high-end men's clothier in Rome. The pieces didn't just click into place, they slammed together with the force of a physical blow. The quietness. The need for sun. The note. He hadn't just left. He had stolen from me. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by something cold and sharp. For a moment, I felt the floor drop out from under me. The betrayal was so absolute, so audacious, it was almost surreal. He had used my own creation, the very symbol of my professional life, as his personal piggy bank. But then, as I stared at the screen, at the clean, color-coded lines of data tracking his every move, the panic began to subside. It was replaced by a profound, chilling calm. He thought he was being clever. He thought he'd found a secret, inexhaustible source of funds, a card with no name that he assumed was some hidden corporate slush fund. He had no idea what he had actually done. He hadn't just stolen a credit card. He had willingly walked into the center of the labyrinth, and every step he took was leaving a perfect, indelible trail of breadcrumbs for the authorities to follow. I leaned back in my chair and took a slow, deep breath, the scent of coffee and rain filling my lungs. I looked at the alerts popping up on my screen, a new one, for a ridiculously expensive watch from a boutique in Capri. Instead of crying, I found myself smiling. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a chess player who has just realized her opponent has fallen for a trap set 10 moves ago. "Oh, Julian," I whispered to the empty room. "You have no idea." My first call was not to the police, but to my lawyer, Maria. She was more than just a lawyer, she was a friend I'd known since college, a sharp, pragmatic woman who had seen me through every stage of my relationship with Julian, her skepticism always politely veiled but present. "Annie? It's early. Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice still thick with sleep. I took a sip of my coffee, the warmth a small comfort against the chill in my gut. "Everything is about to change," I said, and then I told her everything. I explained about the labyrinth, about the alerts, about the first-class ticket to Italy. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was a mixture of disbelief and something that sounded suspiciously like admiration. "Let me get this straight," she said slowly. "He stole the login credentials for your professional honeypot account? The one you literally used to demonstrate financial fraud to your clients?" "That's the one," I confirmed, a dry, humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Annie, that's not just stupid. That's poetically stupid," Maria said. I could hear the rustle of papers as she moved around her office. "Okay. Do not do anything. Don't cancel the card. Don't call him. Don't even text him. Let him dig. Every purchase he makes is another felony charge. What should I do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. You are the victim of a crime. We're going to act like it, she said, her tone all business now. I'm going to contact a friend of mine at the federal prosecutor's office. Given the amount and the interstate, well, international, nature of the fraud, this is out of local jurisdiction. For now, you just watch. And you document. Save every alert. Take screenshots. And Annie? Yes? I know this hurts. But you're going to be okay. He did this to himself. Her words were a lifeline. For the rest of the day, I tried to work, but my focus was fractured. My eyes kept straying to the labyrinth's dashboard, which I kept open on a second monitor. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash. A charge for a custom-tailored linen suit. A lavish dinner for two at a seaside restaurant in Positano. That one stung, the casual cruelty of it. A rental for a vintage Alfa Romeo Spider. He was living out a fantasy, a sun-drenched Italian dream, and he was funding it with a crime that was being meticulously recorded. Each alert that pinged was a strange mix of pain and vindication. The pain was for the man I thought I had married, the dream I had held onto for so long, now dissolving into this ugly, pathetic reality. The vindication was colder, sharper. It was the feeling of a boundary, long eroded, finally being redrawn in steel. He had underestimated me. He had seen my kindness as weakness, my stability as a resource to be exploited. He had never truly seen me, the woman who built the very trap he was now dancing in. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cooked a meal just for myself. I opened a bottle of good Willamette Valley Pinot Noir that Julian had always said was too subtle for his palate. I sat at my dining room table, the one he always complained was too small for entertaining, and ate in the quiet stillness of the apartment. The space already felt different, larger. The silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful. Over the next few days, I settled into a strange new rhythm. I would work, I would talk to Maria, and I would watch Julian's digital footprint spread across the Amalfi Coast. He was brazen. He bought designer sunglasses, expensive leather bags, and a series of abstract paintings from a gallery in Ravello. The total was climbing past $50,000. He was building a new life for himself, brick by stolen brick. On Friday morning, I got the call Maria had been preparing me for. Annalise Miller, a man's voice asked, calm and professional. This is Special Agent Davies with the FBI's Cybercrime Division. We've been monitoring significant fraudulent activity originating from a financial account registered to your business. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice was even when I replied. Yes, Agent Davies. I've been expecting your call. There was a brief pause. You have? Yes, I said. The person responsible is my husband, Julian Croft. I spent the next hour on the phone with Agent Davies, explaining the entire situation. I told him about the labyrinth, how it was designed, and how every transaction was logged. He was silent for a long moment after I finished, and I could hear the faint sound of him typing. Mrs. Miller, he said finally, a note of professional awe in his tone, in my 15 years of investigating financial crimes, I have never seen a perpetrator so thoroughly and efficiently document his own felony. You've handed us a case on a silver platter. What happens now? I asked. We'll continue to monitor his activity, Agent Davies explained. Frankly, the more he spends, the stronger our case becomes. When he returns to the United States, we'll be ready to bring him in for questioning. We have a flag on his passport, so we'll know the moment he books a return flight. The call ended with him assuring me that I was in no way liable for the charges. The account was insured, and since it was a tool for fraud detection, the case was exceptionally clear-cut. When I hung up, I felt a weight I didn't even know I was carrying lift from my shoulders. It was real. This wasn't just a marital spat or a financial disagreement. It was a federal crime. The system I had built to protect others was now protecting me. That weekend, I drove out to the coast by myself. I walked along the beach at Cannon Beach, the mist cool on my face, watching the waves crash against Haystack Rock. The vastness of the ocean, the endless gray sky, it didn't make me feel small. It made me feel calm. For years, my world had revolved around Julian's volatile orbit. I had tailored my moods, my plans, my very finances to accommodate his whims. Now, standing on that windswept beach, I felt my own center of gravity returning. I thought about his note. "I'll be back transformed." He had no idea how true that would be. But the transformation wasn't his. It was mine. A week and a half after he left, Julian came home. I knew he was coming. Agent Davies had called me the day before. "He's booked a flight," he'd said. "Lands at PDX tomorrow evening. He's flying coach." The detail was so perfectly pathetic that I almost laughed. The money, it seemed, had finally run out. "What's the plan?" I asked, my hand trembling slightly as I gripped the phone. "We'd like to let him come home first," Agent Davies said. "Let him settle in. We find that suspects in his frame of mind are often more forthcoming when they feel they're back on safe ground. We'll execute the arrest warrant at your residence tomorrow night, around 9. Is that acceptable?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That's acceptable." All day, a nervous energy thrummed beneath my skin. I cleaned the apartment obsessively, scrubbing away the last invisible traces of him. I moved his clothes from the closet into boxes and stacked them in the spare room. I took down the pretentious abstract print he'd bought for the living room and replaced it with a serene landscape of the Oregon coast. I was not just cleaning a home, I was reclaiming my territory. He arrived just after 8. I heard his key in the lock, a sound that used to mean comfort and now sent a jolt of ice through my veins. The door swung open, and there he was. He looked different. He was deeply tanned, his hair sun-bleached at the tips. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive-looking white linen suit, unbuttoned to reveal a sliver of his chest, and a pair of designer sunglasses were perched on his head. He looked like a caricature from a bad European film. He dropped a designer leather duffel bag on the floor, the thud echoing in the quiet apartment. He smiled, a wide, confident grin that didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile he used when he was about to sell you on a bad idea. "Thanks for the upgrade, my dear," he grinned as he strolled into the living room, tossing his sunglasses onto the coffee table. He stood there, obnoxiously confident in his tailored suit, his luggage spilling high-end logos. "First class to Europe, luxury hotels, this is the kind of life I've been missing, Annie." His words hung in the air, so absurd, so completely divorced from reality, that I couldn't help it. A small laugh escaped my lips, a sound that was half amusement, half disbelief. He frowned, his confidence faltering for a fraction of a second. "What's so funny?" he snapped. I looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time in days. I saw the cheap performance, the desperate need for validation behind the expensive facade. The love I once felt was gone, replaced by a vast, aching pity. "Oh, Julian," I said, shaking my head slowly, my voice quiet but clear as a bell. "You have no idea what you've done." He let out a short, dismissive laugh, recovering his swagger. "Oh, I think I do. I've injected a little bit of excitement into our lives. You should have seen Positano, Annie. The light, it changes you." He gestured around the room with a theatrical sweep of his arm. "We've been living in this gray little box for too long. I needed to break free. For us." "For us?" I repeated, my voice remaining level. I leaned against the doorframe of my office, my arms crossed. I felt strangely detached, like a scientist observing a specimen. "Of course, for us," he said, kicking off his Italian leather loafers. He sank into the armchair, propping his feet up on the ottoman. I was networking. Making connections. You can't put a price on that kind of inspiration. Actually, I said, I can. The price, so far, is approximately $78,451. He waved a dismissive hand. Details, details. It's an investment in our future. You're always so focused on the numbers, Annie. You have to see the bigger picture. He leaned forward, his expression turning earnest. I found it, you know. The next big idea. A curated wellness retreat on the Amalfi Coast. For artists and visionaries. Think of it. The sun, the sea, the creativity. He was spinning his web, the way he always did, expecting me to be caught in it. But this time, I was standing outside of it, watching. Every word he spoke was a thread in the indictment he was weaving against himself. I had my phone in my pocket, recording the entire conversation. Maria's idea. Let him talk, she'd said. He'll confess to everything without even realizing it. It sounds expensive, I said, my tone neutral. The best things are, he said with a self-satisfied smirk. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a small, velvet-wrapped box. And I didn't forget about you. He opened it to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a sapphire pendant. It was beautiful, and it was bought with stolen money. The gesture was so hollow, so deeply insulting, it almost broke my composure. Where did you get the money for all this, Julian? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. He finally seemed to register that something was wrong. My calmness was unnerving him. He had expected tears, anger, a fight. He had a script prepared for that. He had no script for this quiet, observant stillness. I found a solution, he stammered, his bravado beginning to fray at the edges. An account you had, a corporate thing. It was just sitting there. I figured you wouldn't miss it. It's for the best, you'll see. A corporate thing, I echoed. I pushed myself off the doorframe and walked slowly toward him. I stopped a few feet away, just looking at him. The labyrinth. That's what it's called. His eyes widened slightly. How did you? I built it, Julian, I said, and for the first time, my voice carried the full weight of my exhaustion and my anger. I designed it. Every line of code. It's a fraud detection system. A honeypot. Every single purchase you made, from the plane ticket to that necklace, has been flagged, logged, and sent directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The color drained from his face. The tan he was so proud of suddenly looked like a sickly yellow veneer. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish pulled from water. The confident artist, the visionary, had vanished. In his place was a scared, small man in an expensive suit. No, he whispered. You're lying. You're just saying that to scare me. Am I? I asked. As if on cue, there was a firm, solid knock at the door. Julian flinched as if he'd been struck. His eyes darted from me to the door and back again, wide with panic. He looked trapped. And he was. I walked to the door and opened it. Agent Davies stood on the welcome mat, flanked by two uniformed Portland police officers. He was calm, professional, and his presence filled the doorway. He nodded politely at me. Annalise Miller? Yes. Please, come in, I said, stepping aside. Agent Davies walked into the living room, his eyes immediately finding Julian, who was frozen in the armchair. He looked like a statue of panic. Julian Croft? Agent Davies asked, his voice even and authoritative. Julian could only nod, his throat working. I'm Special Agent Davies with the FBI. You're under arrest for multiple counts of wire fraud and access device fraud. The world seemed to shrink to the space of our living room. The officers moved forward as Agent Davies recited the Miranda rights, the familiar words sounding surreal in the apartment I had shared with this man for nearly a decade. Julian didn't resist. He seemed to have shrunk inside his fancy linen suit. As one of the officers gently helped him to his feet to cuff his hands behind his back, his eyes found mine. They were filled with a desperate, pleading confusion. "Annie," he said, his voice cracking. "You did this? Why?" "I'm your husband." I looked at him, at the man who had been a stranger to me for years, even while sleeping beside me. The pity I felt had hardened into something else, resolve. "No, Julian," I said, my voice clear and steady. "You did this. A husband doesn't steal from his wife." They led him out of the apartment. I watched from the doorway as they guided him down the stairs and into the rainy Portland night. The red and blue lights of the patrol car pulsed silently, washing over the wet street and the dark green leaves of the trees. Then, the door clicked shut, and I was alone. The silence that rushed in was absolute. It was the sound of the end of something, and the terrifying, exhilarating sound of a beginning. I stood in the middle of my living room for a long time, just breathing. The expensive leather bag lay on the floor. The velvet box with the stolen necklace sat on the table. They were artifacts from another life. A life that was, finally, over. The days that followed were a blur of legalities and quiet introspection. Maria handled everything with her usual brisk efficiency, acting as a buffer between me and the storm Julian had created. He had, as she predicted, tried to blame me. He told the investigators that I had given him permission, that the card was a gift, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. But the evidence was irrefutable. The recording of our final conversation, where he'd admitted to everything, was the nail in his coffin. Faced with a mountain of evidence, he accepted a plea bargain. There would be no dramatic trial. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of felony fraud. He avoided prison time, a fact that initially stung, but Maria put it in perspective. "He's not going to jail, Annie," she said over coffee one afternoon, "but his life as he knows it is over. He has to pay full restitution, every single cent. He'll have a felony record, which means getting a decent job will be next to impossible. His credit is destroyed for at least a decade. He's been sentenced to 500 hours of community service. In a way, it's a more fitting punishment. He wanted to live a life of leisure and luxury. Instead, he'll be paying off his debt to you and society for years." I nodded, stirring my latte. The anger had mostly faded, leaving behind a profound sense of melancholy for the years I had lost, for the person I had allowed myself to become in that marriage, smaller, quieter, constantly accommodating. The divorce was swift and uncontested. I kept the apartment and its contents. He kept his debt and his felony record. The day the final decree arrived in the mail, I felt not triumph, but a quiet, clean slate of relief. I held the papers in my hand and cried, not for him, but for me. For the woman who had finally found her way out of the labyrinth of her own making. I started to rebuild. It began with small things. I donated all of his belongings, the designer suit, the books on art theory, the single-origin coffee beans he insisted were the only kind worth drinking, to a local charity. I rearranged the furniture, painted the bedroom a soft, calming shade of sea green, and filled the empty spaces with things that brought me joy, more plants, stacks of books I'd always meant to read, a comfortable armchair perfect for curling up in on a rainy afternoon. My work flourished. The story of the labyrinth and its unwitting test subject became a semi-legendary case study among my clients. It was a powerful, if unconventional, testament to the effectiveness of my systems. My business grew, and with it, my own sense of self-worth. The work I did was valuable. I was valuable. It was a simple truth I had forgotten how to believe in. I began to reconnect with the parts of myself I had set aside to make room for Julian. I started hiking again, exploring the lush trails of Forest Park, finding solace in the scent of damp earth and pine. I reconnected with old friends, had long, lazy brunches, and went to see live music without having to endure a lecture on the band's semiotic significance. I was rediscovering the simple, quiet rhythm of my own life. 6 months after Julian's arrest, I was on my balcony, tending to my new herb garden. The evening air was cool and smelled of rain and roses from a neighbor's yard. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. It was a link to an article in a local paper about a community garden project. There was a photo accompanying the article, a group of volunteers holding shovels and smiling. In the back row, barely visible, was Julian. He looked thin, tired, and utterly ordinary. The arrogant artist was gone, replaced by a man in a faded t-shirt, picking up litter. I felt a fleeting pang of something, not pity, exactly, but a kind of sad recognition of his diminished state. He had chased a fantasy and had crashed into a hard, unforgiving reality. He wasn't my problem anymore. He was just a story. I closed the article and looked out at the Portland skyline, the lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over the city. I thought about the woman I was a year ago, so afraid of disrupting the fragile peace of my marriage, so willing to shrink herself to fit into someone else's dream. She seemed like a different person, someone I knew a long time ago. My own dream, I realized, had never been grand or flashy. It was this, a quiet evening, a home that felt like a sanctuary, work that I loved, and a deep, unshakable sense of my own peace. It was a dream I had to lose almost everything to find. A gentle rain began to fall, pattering softly on the leaves of my basil plants. I didn't go inside. I just stood there, letting the cool drops fall on my face, feeling clean and new. The chapter with Julian was closed. I didn't know what the next one would hold, but for the first time in a very long time, I was genuinely excited to find out. I was the author of my own story now, and I was finally free to write a beautiful one. The year that followed was one of quiet construction. Life didn't suddenly become a sun-drenched montage of happiness. Healing, I learned, is a much more patient, Portland-esque process. It unfolds slowly, like a fern frond, in the gentle, persistent rain. My business, Aegis Solutions, thrived in the wake of the incident. The story, sanitized of its most personal details, became a powerful case study. I was no longer just a consultant, I was a strategist who had lived on the other side of a breach, who understood deception not just in theory, but with an intimate, visceral knowledge. I hired 2 new analysts, bright young minds who brought a fresh energy to my quiet office. Our space expanded, but the scent of ferns and brewing coffee remained the same. It was my anchor. I found new rhythms. Tuesdays became pottery nights, a messy, tactile escape from the digital precision of my days. I found a surprising peace in the feel of wet clay spinning beneath my hands, in the focused effort of centering a wobbly lump and shaping it into something whole and useful, a mug, a bowl, a vase. It was a tangible metaphor for what I was trying to do with my own life. My friendship with Maria deepened. We fell into an easy routine of Sunday brunches, where we spoke less and less of Julian and more about books, politics, and her disastrous attempts at online dating. She was my rock, but I was no longer a person in need of rescue. We were just 2 friends, sharing lives that were full and complex in their own ways. One Saturday in late autumn, I was at the PSU Farmers Market, my canvas bag heavy with chanterelle mushrooms and a crisp bunch of kale. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, grilled sausages, and cider donuts. It was a perfect Portland morning, gray and vibrant all at once. As I was paying for a loaf of sourdough, a voice called my name. Annalise? I turned. It was Eleanor Croft, Julian's mother. I hadn't seen or spoken to her since before the divorce. She looked older, the lines around her eyes and mouth etched deeper. Her chic, artistic flair had been replaced by a kind of weary fragility. She was clutching a small bouquet of dahlias to her chest like a shield. Eleanor, I said, my voice even. My heart gave a single, hard thump, an old reflex, but the panic didn't follow. I just felt a wave of sadness for her. I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk to me, she said, her eyes avoiding mine. It's good to see you, I replied, and I meant it. My fight had never been with her. He's living with us now, she said, the words a quiet confession. He's finished his community service. He's trying. He really is. He works at a nursery out in Beaverton. It's hard work. It's humbling. I nodded, unsure of what to say. I'm glad he's working. She finally looked at me, her eyes pleading. He talks about you. He knows what he did, what he lost. He was always a dreamer, Annalise. His dreams just got ahead of him. I heard the old narrative, the one I used to believe myself. He's a brilliant but misunderstood artist. He has a vision. He just needs support. For a moment, I saw the ghost of the woman I used to be, the one who would have absorbed Eleanor's pain, who would have felt responsible for Julian's downfall. But she was gone. Eleanor, I said, my voice gentle but firm. What Julian did wasn't a dream. It was a choice. A series of choices that hurt people, including you and me. I am truly sorry for the pain this has caused you. But I'm not a part of his story anymore. I held up my bag of groceries. I have to get going. Please, take care of yourself. I gave her a small, sincere smile and walked away. I didn't look back. I felt her gaze on my back, but I didn't feel the weight of it. I had handed back the burden of her son's actions. It was not mine to carry. Life continued its gentle, forward momentum. The seasons turned. The rain gave way to a brilliant, sun-soaked summer, and then returned again, washing the city clean. About 18 months after the arrest, I ran into him. It was a Tuesday evening, after my pottery class. I was covered in a fine film of dried clay dust and stopped at a neighborhood grocery store to pick up milk. I was in the dairy aisle, staring blankly at the overwhelming variety of oat milk, when I heard a soft, hesitant voice. Annie? I froze, my hand hovering over a carton. I knew that voice, but it was different. The booming, confident timbre was gone, replaced by something quieter, frayed around the edges. I turned slowly. It was Julian. He looked diminished. The expensive suits and sun-kissed tan were gone. He was wearing simple jeans and a worn gray hoodie. He was thinner, and his dark, intense eyes, the ones that had once held entire universes of promise, now just looked tired. He was holding a small basket with a container of soup and a box of crackers. My first thought, surprisingly, was not of anger or fear. It was an objective, almost clinical observation. He looks like a normal person. Julian, I said. It wasn't a question. Hi, he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He looked profoundly uncomfortable. You look good. The pottery look suits you. He gestured vaguely at the clay on my cheek. Thanks, I said. You're looking well. It was a polite lie, but the truth felt too cruel. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled only by the low hum of the refrigerated coolers. The man who could once fill any silence with a torrent of charming words now seemed to have none. Listen, he said finally, his gaze fixed on the floor tiles. I know there's nothing I can say. But I wanted to, if I ever saw you again. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not the way I said it before. Not to get something. Just, sorry. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, shame. It was real and unadorned. I was a coward, he continued, his voice low and raspy. I was terrified of being a failure, of being ordinary. So I built this whole fantasy, and I made you pay for it. I took your kindness and your strength, and I used it to hide from myself. What I did to you was unforgivable. I see that now. He took a shaky breath. Working at the nursery, you see things grow. Slowly. You can't rush them. You just have to do the work every day. Water them, feed them. Be patient. I should have done that with us. With my own life. I listened, my body perfectly still. The apology I had once craved, the validation I had once needed to hear, was finally here. And I discovered a strange and liberating truth: I didn't need it anymore. My peace was not contingent on his remorse. I had built it myself, from the ground up. But his words, his raw, painful honesty, did something else. They loosened the last, tight knot of resentment in my chest. "Thank you for saying that, Julian," I said, and my voice was full of a grace I didn't know I possessed. "I appreciate it." I paused, then added, "I hope you find your way. I hope you learn to be patient with yourself." A flicker of surprise, of relief, crossed his face. He seemed to have expected anger, a dismissal. He gave a small, sad nod. "I'm trying. One day at a time." "Me too," I said. And that was it. There were no more words to say. I gave him a final nod, picked up my oat milk and walked towards the checkout. I didn't look back, but this time it wasn't an act of self-preservation. It was simply a matter of moving in a different direction. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of chamomile tea. The city lights glowed below, a sprawling, beautiful constellation. I thought about the man in the grocery store, a ghost from a past life. Seeing him hadn't broken me. It hadn't even cracked the surface of the peace I had so carefully cultivated. It had simply been an encounter, a closing of a circle. I could finally see him not as a monster or a villain, but as a flawed, broken person who had made terrible choices. And I could wish him well, from a safe and respectful distance, and know that his journey was no longer tied to mine in any way. The next weekend, I went on a date. He was a landscape architect named Ben whom I'd met through a mutual friend. He was quiet, with kind eyes and soil under his fingernails. He didn't speak of grand visions or soul-altering journeys. He spoke about the challenges of growing Japanese maples in Oregon's climate and the simple joy of watching a seed sprout. He listened more than he talked. When I spoke about my work, his eyes didn't glaze over, they lit up with genuine curiosity. It was just coffee. It might not lead anywhere. But as I sat across from him, laughing at one of his gentle jokes, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in a decade. It wasn't the dizzying, breathless excitement Julian had offered. It was something calmer, more grounded. It was the feeling of possibility. I walked home through the tree-lined streets of my neighborhood, the evening air cool and promising more rain. I thought about the labyrinth I had built, the intricate trap of logic and code. For so long, I thought my greatest strength was in building walls to keep threats out. But now I knew my real strength was in my ability to heal, to grow, to open the door, just a crack, and to believe that something good and true might be waiting on the other side. My life was my own creation now, and it was becoming a beautiful, quiet, and wonderfully ordinary thing. And I was finally at peace in it.